Back in 2023, a bunch of things happened in my personal life that interrupted my ability to perform timely reviews of Quantum Leap 2022. So much so that it was 7 months between my reviews of Episode 6 and Episode 7. But something else happened to me during that time. I finished watching Season 1, and I realized that I wasn't enjoying watching the show. The show didn't move me the way the original Quantum Leap did. Stakes never seemed high, and I never really grew to relate to or care about any of the main characters, let alone any of the side characters in each episode. I tried watching the Season 2 premiere, and I turned it off about 20 minutes in and still haven't got back into it. I just didn't care. And this wasn't the only TV program I felt this way about. Despite being a lifelong Star Trek fan, I watched Season 1 of Strange New Worlds and was so disinterested in the series that I couldn't even get 5 minutes into its Season 2 premiere. Same with Lower Decks Season 4 and Prodigy Season 2. Picard and Discovery have been massive disappointments, and I really only watch those because I want to support some of the other reviewers on YouTube that I've grown to respect and in some cases befriend. Maybe I was going through a depression of some sort or entertainment burnout, but I didn't feel this way about all TV. I liked the first season of The Witcher, and overall I liked The Expanse, Severance, Mythic Quest, and I found I still liked Rick and Morty enough to review all of Season 7's episodes. I think it's just been these lackluster series that are based on older IPs and just do a really poor job of respecting the lore that came before it. Not to mention that the writing has been terrible. I hear reviewers of modern Star Trek and Star Wars series refer to this phenomenon as IP mining, where everything of value of a particular intellectual property is extracted as cheaply as possible to make the most short-term gains. I feel this description may also be apt for Quantum Leap. I'm also not into rage watching and rage reviewing, really, so I find it hard to justify expending energy on it. Regardless, there has been a constant weight upon me when I began reviewing this series, and despite the fact that very few people watch these videos, compared to my dinosaur-themed duck song parody, I have started something and I have a sense of obligation to see this through. My Quantum Leap reviews used to be quite thorough, but to be honest, I don't have the energy to go in-depth into something that I feel is a poor substitute for the original. So I'm going to try and employ the speedier methods I use for my Rick and Morty reviews in order to get these done and put this series to bed. If you're watching this, I really appreciate you being here and I apologize for the delay. Now let's get this review of Quantum Leap 2022 Season 1, Episode 8, Stand By Ben, going. Ben has leaped into a kid named Ben Winters in 1996 where he and 3 other misfit kids have stolen a car and are escaping from Sierra Youth Academy, some kind of boarding school for troubled youth. The group consists of one-dimensional characters whose names aren't worth remembering. I call them Pothead,
lesbian broad who cuts herself,
and Ben, who is a thief. On their way to freedom, a tire is blown and the car rolls off the highway and into the California desert. When Addison shows up, Ben tells her about his conversation with Janice from the previous spooky episode, but aside from some flashes, doesn't remember much about Janice. The 1996 story is pretty standard fare. In the original history, the kids died of exposure during their escape, which was covered up under the guise of a school hike, but Ben helps lead them to safety and exposes the abusive behavior of the school administrators while helping them all become better people and lifelong friends along the way.
lesbian broad who cuts herself,
Has an open-minded uncle who is also a reporter who helps break the story and takes down the academy. In 2022, the team discusses the revelation that Janice has hacked into the imaging chamber. Not exactly sure why it's a revelation, since in the last episode Ian said he figured out where the interference in the imaging chamber was coming from, so either he was wrong about whatever he thought and didn't say, or it's just poor timing and/or writing. Security woman Jen tracks down Janice's imaging chamber to a conveniently close-by East LA location, and she sets out to capture Janice, but then her and Magic are stuck in an elevator together when the entire base goes into security lockdown. This is courtesy of Janice, whose backdoor access allows her to monitor everything and buys her time to escape. Ian has a freak-out, Magic has a heart-to-heart with Jen about her absentee dad, which ends conveniently as they get rescued. Of course, Janice has already given them the slip, taking the important pieces of her imaging chamber with her. After the wrap-up, where all the other actors stand around politely in silence while Addison speaks, Ben has flashbacks of talking to Janice and tells Addison he remembers why he leapt in the first place, to save Addison. I could be wrong, but this is the first episode where we don't see who Ben leaps into at the end. And now my thoughts. I'll start with the one thing I liked about this episode, the music. The original Quantum Leap spent most of the time in the 50s, 60s, and 70s and played music of that era, which was from my parents' childhoods and early adulthoods. It was nice to hear music from my youth, and on that point this episode pushed the nostalgia buttons the way I assume the original series did for older viewers. Though I'm not sure why whatever ne'er-do-wells who own the cabin have the latest cassette tape from No Doubt sitting in their boombox. Now for my controversial opinion about this episode. To use a modern parlance, everyone in it is too woke. But before you bring out the virtual torches and hashtag pitchforks, hear me out. The original Quantum Leap series was very progressive for its time in that it often put Sam into situations that were really uncomfortable for viewers in the 90s. Explicit racism and apartheid policies, sexual harassment, even treatment of people on the autism spectrum. These episodes showed us how the past was far less progressive than our present. Often, Sam was the only progressive person in the situation because of his set of modern-day mores. Everyone else around him was behaving according to the norms of the period. On occasion, you'd have characters who would wax philosophical about a future where things are better, often describing Sam's present, or you'd have characters that recognize the injustice but fall back on "that's just the way it is" as an excuse for a lack of action on their part, but generally everyone was okay with using the N-word or with slapping a woman's butt in the workplace because those were the attitudes of the time. And when Sam applied his modern sense of social justice to situations, he would get mixed results. Sometimes he'd change people's minds, other times he would discover that some people were stuck in their ways and virtually unchangeable. Sometimes characters would push back and point out the flaws in Sam's modern ideals. It's just something good science fiction does. It examines and questions our world through the fantasy. Take this exchange between Sam and Stoppa from the series finale.
You know, I'm getting a little tired of you calling him dummy.
Why?
Well, how would you like it if people called you crippled?
I am crippled.
Wouldn't physically disabled be a more humane way to describe your condition?
What you call it, no gonna change it.
No, but it might change people's attitudes toward you.
Coming back to the 2022 episode, my point is that the kids around Ben are far too accepting and, dare I say, celebratory of the one lesbian character in their group. Remember, this was 1996. Ellen wouldn't come out as gay in her sitcom for another year. As someone who was 18 and straight in 1996, but not terribly social, I can tell you that the general opinions I picked up on regarding homosexuality amongst teens at the time was kind of a disinterest. As in, you didn't really care who someone was attracted to, you didn't see a need to know about it at all. Kind of like don't ask, don't tell, to each their own sort of situation. There were other less tolerant and downright horrible opinions, of course, but the reactions of these kids in this episode to her lesbianism seems more like a 2022 reaction and not a representation of 1996 mores. What I think would have made for far better drama would be if Ben, who is close friends with a queer person in 2022, were the sole voice of modern progressiveness in the car. Have the idiot dopehead in the front say something in line with 1996 opinions but insensitive by today's standards, or use a homophobic slur, and have Ben stand up for the girl and tell him why he's wrong, and have that character consider his words, or challenge Ben. That would have been more like classic Quantum Leap and better writing in general. But having everyone basically on board with a lesbian in 1996 is safe for a show in 2022. They won't have to worry about being called out as haters or phobes. It's safe. But safe makes for boring drama and adds little, if anything, to the discussion. End of controversial opinion. At one point, Hothead is overheard telling Pothead about a band he had never heard of who were going to be releasing a song called Wannabe in America soon. I'm not sure how she, some random California girl basically confined to kid prison, was aware of this information, as the Spice Girls were largely unknown outside of the UK in 1996, and the internet of 1996, which I remember using, wouldn't have offered streaming services or even MP3 downloads yet for her to hear the music. Heck, there wasn't even a decent search engine yet, and you had to memorize or bookmark any website you wanted to go to. Anyhow, I regress. At one point,
Lesbian broad who cuts herself.
Uses the term self-harm, which, while not unheard of, becomes a more commonly used phrase about 10 years later, so it's odd that a youth is using it. Ben also uses the phrase off the grid a few times, which nobody questions, despite it being a rather unheard of term in 1996. The vignette scenes when Addison gave Ben the backstories of his companions felt out of place and weird. They reminded me of the sort of cutscenes you'd see during expository on CSI. In the original Quantum Leap, Al would do the same, but it would be juxtaposed with Sam reacting to the news or having to interact with people around him and pretend he's not having a conversation. B-roll footage, while utilized in the original series, wasn't used in moments like this. And finally, it's amazing that the OG hand link that Janice got from her mother, which in-universe was late 90s tech, was still compatible with the very modern computer system that Ziggy has evolved into, especially since it sounds like Ben and Ian rewrote a lot of the code. Anyhow, that's my much belated review of episode 8. What did you think of the episode? Please let me know in the comments below. I obviously struggle with balancing out creating YouTube content with everything else I do, so if you like what I create and want to help me out, please like, subscribe, and share. If you like drawing or animating, please check out my social animation site Drawn, or try out my animation studio suite Vash. If you like good science fiction, check out my time travel novel Holocene, available on Amazon and free to read if you have a Kindle Unlimited subscription. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the future.